All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you.
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What's up, horror heads, and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa.
And we are joined this week by a very special guest. If you listen and you're from Tuscaloosa, I'm sure you know this man. He has done stand-up around here. His Instagram is guaranteed to make you hungry. One of the funniest guys I know, Adam Condra. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
We are very excited you're here, man.
I do have to address something up front.
Do it.
So I've been out of the comedy game for a while. I'm on an extended hiatus, I guess. But there's an inconvenient truth about stand-ups and podcasting, which are, very close-knit communities. Usually comedians are either funny on stage or they're funny on a podcast. They're not both usually. It's very rare that someone is both funny in both settings. So this is just to say, I'm going to warn you up front. I'm great on stage. I'm very funny. And those of y'all who are listening at home, if you're disappointed in this episode by my contributions, you can go listen to my album. It'll make up for it. I promise. But I'm self-aware enough to know that I'm not great on podcasts. So I'm gonna try and weaponize that self-awareness and work against it tonight. So
fair enough.
Just a little heads up for you.
So I reached out to Adam to do the episode with us today because we are doing the movie X.
I have questions about this. About your intention here.
Well, I'll tell you what it came down to. When this movie came out earlier this year, this is the one that people have been messaging us about. They're replying to our posts. They're in our DMs. Are you going to do X? Are you going to do X? We try to wait for something to go streaming, but we decided a sweet spot for this movie was the fact that Pearl was going to come out this weekend. So when I was looking through ideas for guest hosts and for some people, Adam has an amazing Letterboxd history. Okay. Your movie reviews are great. And when this one was rating so high, I was like, this is a good one to bring on a guy who has great critical analysis of movies, because this thing right now is topping at like 96-97% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh wow.
A lot of people seem to really like it, and there's a
kind
lot
of unheard of in the horror genre.
Yeah,
like, that's very rare.
Yeah, I haven't looked at any criticism for it, but that's not what I was expecting. So.
And so I reached out to you for this one because I knew your analysis. This is one that plays more into the analytical game than just let's just talk about all the fun ways they killed people. We are going to talk about that. But this movie I thought it played more to the hand of the fact that you are very good at describing what you like and don't like about movies, breaking things down, especially movies that I've seen you very recent. Oh, your Love and Thunder review lately, where you were like, hey, sorry if you're super into it, but like, here it goes. Like, and so I was like, all right, so it's a guy who's not afraid to get one. And if you don't like it, even if other people do. So I just figured it was a good one to have you on.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. And I do appreciate that very much. Here's the thing. I really wanted to know why, if you picked me intentionally for this movie based on different criteria, because I didn't know what I was getting into when you asked me to do the show.
Right.
You're like, yeah, we're going to do X by Ty West. And I was like, okay, great. I like, The Innkeepers and House of the Devil. Sure, let's do it. And then I started watching it and I was like, okay, hang on. Daniel watched this movie and then said, who should we get to talk about this? Let's get the guy who's a vice principal at a private Christian school to talk about this.
Oh, hey, I teach at a Catholic school.
Oh, nice. Orthodox.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know I will be honest. I actually had not watched this movie. I hadn't watched the movie when I asked you to do it. I just did it based on, like I said, critical reception.
Yeah.
So, hey, we're all teachers here. This is a safe space to talk about a movie such as this one. And so when we start to look into X, what we get here is it's fun at parts. It's very thoughtful. It's something that is fresh while still feeling nostalgic in the horror genre. So I'm going to start with you, Adam, and I just want to know, once all of this kind of set in, did it deliver on the promise of being this nostalgic gore fest while still being fresh?
I guess, as I hinted just a few seconds ago, I don't think this is the type of movie I would have watched on my own, given like the subject matter and how it gets into things. I'm also just not a big slasher guy. I tend to prefer more like, Ghost Story or like stuff like The Witch or
Right.
things like that. That's more my jam. I think that this movie wears its influences on its sleeve, and it's very open about that. And I think what West is trying to do is to make something that shares all the DNA of its influences, but also makes a very concerted effort to make the I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call the characters complex.
For
but
a
they
slasher,
have,
though.
yeah, but for a slasher, they have nuance, and I think the thing that's most important is that the movie these characters come front loaded with assumptions because they're trying to make a dirty movie,
Right.
but they are at heart, I think, kind people, and they don't deserve what happens to them. And I think that's what West was trying to accomplish, is to say, you may disapprove of what's going on here and what's happening, but I'm also going to make sure that there's enough nuance to these characters, and there's enough that they, not just in what they say, but also in how they treat people, how they treat the old couple. I'm going to give you a real dynamic there that adds an element of tragedy to this that's usually not present. So I think ultimately I came down kind of the middle of the road, like in the 3-star area, because I think the influence is like,
don't give it away just yet.
Well, I'm sorry.
You want to save the boobs and the gory kills for the end, man.
That's true. Yeah, my bad. How to phrase this?
I don't. Okay, you just did.
I don't think I'll revisit this again down the road, but I do think it has a handful of redeeming qualities, and I do think it's one of those rare movies that actually justifies a prequel. So we can get into that later too.
Okay, Dave,
that's where I come down on it.
Before I continue, one of my coworkers and dear friend, I think of him as my work husband. Andrew Harriman coming in and says, "Oh, I love it, and I teach theology." Yes, he does. He is a theology teacher. Yeah, I love this. From the very first trailer, my interest was piqued because it seemed like a gritty slasher in the vein of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That was the vibe that I got right away. And so I was immediately drawn in. I was like, all right, I got this. And then it was Ty West, right? And House of the Devil's a modern day classic. Right?
Oh, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. So it's like, fuck, I'm in, man. And and Andrew again, yeah, him too. Who isn't, I think, a Ty West fan if you're a fan of horror, modern horror. And I think, he's part of this swing into this pseudo elevated horror. Not all of them are elevated horror, but guys like Jordan Peele and guys like
Ari Aster.
Like Ari Aster. Thank you. Mm-hmm. That's always the next guy I get to. That are kind of making horror respectable again. I feel like William Friedkin did The Exorcist, and then people forgot that horror was good still. And right. And so guys like this come around, and then they make something that yes, has all that DNA, like you were talking about, Adam, of the stuff that came before. But I think it also has a lot to say, like the stuff that came before. Andrew comes in and says, Chainsaw meets any 80s movie by a lake. Yeah, kind of. I think that, even if you look back at Texas Chainsaw, which clearly is one of the heavy influences here, there was a lot to say in that movie too. There's a lot of social commentary about what's going on in Vietnam and what's going on in our own country at that time. And I think a lot of times we forget, because of how influential these movies became on your stock slasher movie, that these movies did have something to say back then. And they have something to say today. I think there's two major themes that run through this movie. One which I picked up on the very first time I watched it, and the second one which I picked up on the second viewing earlier this week, that to me make this worth the rewatch. Aside from the fun factor for me, it's how amazingly layered I think this movie is.
Yeah, what's great about this movie is that it did deliver on exactly what I kind of thought I was going to get after watching the trailer. I thought I was going to get a modern throwback type movie, and that's exactly what I got. And I think that it delivered on the aspect of being fun in far more than I thought it would. I went into this movie. I managed to stay pretty blind on this. I'd seen that trailer, and that was it. So I kind of knew that I understood the concept of the fact that this was a group that was they were looking to make an X-rated film, and then things went horribly wrong. That's pretty much all I knew when I got into this. And what it delivered on was managing to stay tense until it got to that point where the action finally kicked in. What's great about this movie is, for the first while, I mean, it's a long time before anybody dies in this movie, and then they just pile it on. It all happens very quickly.
They don't stop dying.
No, they don't. And it all happens extremely quickly, but you're not left in that weird limbo space that you get into sometimes in these movies, where in an attempt to just get you there, you're just doing circles. And I talked when Nick and I did Antlers a couple weeks back, I said that one of the biggest problems there was they thought they were building layers and building tension, but they were just circling the drain with all these storylines that ultimately went nowhere. Mm-hmm. And this movie managed to create characters that I cared about. It managed to take the trope of bad things happening to not so great people and remind you that they're still people, and they're just because they're making a porno doesn't make them bad people. And yes, the main character has a coke habit, but it doesn't define her life, And so
I think she wants it to, though.
I think so. I do think so.
You got to do a lot of cocaine to have it define your life, though.
But so
hashtag, speaking for a friend.
They managed to create characters that were I think Adam used the word nuanced, and I cared about these people, and I wasn't just waiting for them to get killed or waiting for the action to kick in. I genuinely cared about what most of these people got up to. Not all of them, but for the most part, I cared, which is not something you think about when you think about a slasher. It's like, oh, look, there's trashy teenagers. They're going to die. Cool. I don't care. But that's where it's that word elevated just gets thrown around so much. But that's where that comes in, is that idea of not just the nostalgic gore fest, but adding the element of a story that people care about and characters that you would like to see live. It took a lot of those tropes, and it's very aware. Ty West is very aware, and this movie itself is very aware of what it was doing and how it was going to be in your face with some of those things, but subvert some of those things as well. And it kept you on your toes as to which ones it was going to do. And that led to a movie that I found to be a blast. And it was really something that it was more than I expected it to be. And I will say that because I really thought it was just going to be people go to a farmhouse, they get slaughtered, end of story. And it did a lot more than that. So I was impressed. I really enjoyed that.
Which, by the way, I think I would have been okay with the people go to farmhouse, people die in farmhouse. Routine.
Yeah, I mean, your wonderful host here, podcasting world. If you missed it, gave the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4 or 5 stars. Like, we're not looking for a lot in our slashers.
Yeah, just don't suck.
Yeah, exactly. Just don't suck. And so, yeah, I would have been too, and that's why I was so pleasantly surprised.
So I agree with everything you said, but I don't. It's more like I appreciate what the movie does, but it didn't quite get me there. It didn't get me to the point where I was like upset about what was happening to the characters. It was more like, oh, I realize what he's doing here. He's giving us people who are human and sympathetic, but they're still going to die anyway. And so I think that kind of took me out of it a little bit, where it was like, okay, I'm just going to dissociate now because, this is their fate and this is what's been set up. And
fair enough.
I don't think it's bad by any means. I think West is definitely onto something, and I think there are a number of other themes and conversations in the film that do deliver on the nuance. But in that case, it was more like, I appreciate this, but I'm not like fully on board.
That I find that's people feel that way sometimes about various different bands. Like Fish is kind of like that.
Yeah.
Where it's like they're a lot easier to appreciate than they are to enjoy.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Well, it's like I would love to get into Rush, but I don't know the first thing about appreciating what Rush does, right?
Okay. Well, join us next week when we start Shiver, Rush podcast, where I will walk you through all of Rush's catalog.
Yeah. I can't geek out over time signatures and all that stuff.
Yeah. Maybe the greatest rock band of all time. I'll just drop that little nugget there.
Or Warhammer, it's another example. It's like, I would love to, go to college for Warhammer because apparently that's what it takes to get into it. But like, I can't do more than just
and then there's 40K.
Trust fund. Yeah.
See, I didn't even know those were different things. So.
Oh yeah. I know way too much about unimportant things. So before we move on, Andy comes in. Andrew, sorry. This movie shows you can make a new slasher film and stay in line with classics and make a great movie. And I think that's a rare thing, that we have a movie that so clearly identifies itself as a throwback and yet accepts that it is a modern movie. I think it's one of its best qualities. So to move on into our next segment, which I think I outdid myself today in our show note titles. So a section I'm calling Gonzo Storytelling, because everyone's favorite pornography is, of course, Gonzo porn, right?
Sure.
So Andrew says 100%. Of course it is. Just get in there and start fucking, right? Who cares about the pizza? Who cares about the pipes?
That's not where my mind went when you said Gonzo.
You thought of the Muppet.
You were in the Muppet space, weren't you? Yeah. I mean, I've seen that one too.
That's a great one. What do you think that nose is for? Okay, so there's a plot here that is just as absurd as it is, I think, nuanced, right? This is territory that I think, if handled incorrectly, could have very easily just been an exploitation movie. And Ty West handles it deftly, I think. So, but I don't want to know what I think, because I know what I think. I want to know what you all think. Does how he handles this material help or hurt this movie? And in the end, is it a good story? So Adam, I'll throw it to you.
Well, I have to, full disclosure. I ended up skipping through some of the more lurid stuff, just fast forwarding a little bit, because I was like, I'm not really.
That's okay. I watched some of it 2 or 3 times, so I watched
it all evens out.
Perfect. Okay. So I can't speak to that firsthand. I did watch the Dead Meat episode on it last night. The Kill Count. Are y'all familiar with that?
Yeah.
And in that show, he talked a lot about some behind the scenes stuff with the intimacy coordinator and everything. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like West was trying to keep it tasteful and like not being like, okay, this is what the characters are doing, and I'm not hiding that, but also I'm not reveling in it either. And I'm not going to like make this a thing that you come to, to, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I know what you
to
mean.
ogle it. Like, I'm going to leave enough
Right.
space in your mind to where it's not fully pornographic and distracting. Right?
Yeah.
Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah.
I think it was
pretty spot
necessary
on.
to the story. What was there, I think, benefited the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to go back to your original question, all I needed to know was what they were doing, like what their goals were, in order for the story to make sense. I do have a lot of questions about Pearl and Howard, and really, it's really rare for me to think this, because normally I think there's just too much backstory in modern movies, and they tend to over-explain everything. And so I think it's, especially with horror movies, I think it's really good when you have the freedom to fill in details for yourself,
Right.
because there's more mystery to that and there's more tension to that. But in this case, there's a few offhand comments, and there's the man in the basement, and it made me wonder, okay, what exactly is going on between the two of them, and why did it lead to this specifically? Like, there's got to be more going on here than just we're jealous of these young kids who can still have sex. And so
Right.
that's one of the reasons where I'm like, I would actually be interested in a prequel to this, because there's a missing link there that I wasn't finding. So I think in terms of what the characters do, I think it sets them up well, and it sets up what makes them sympathetic perfectly. But I actually wanted more from the villains. So that's my initial reaction to it. I don't know. Maybe y'all noticed something I didn't.
Yeah, no, that's super fair, and I think that you're right in saying that this is a time where a prequel that's coming out, because of the story that we're delivering, the prequel that's coming out doesn't feel like a cash grab. It feels like a legitimate reason to explain what's going on, because that was the part of the story that we were left to fill in the most blanks, to guess kind of what we thought led them to this point.
They were shot back to back. It was intended that way.
Right.
Yeah. And there's two things in particular, which is one, when Lorraine is trapped in the basement and she sees the guy hanging there and he's been just, graphically desiccated and all this other stuff. And then there's one line where I can't remember if it's right after she pushes Bobby Lynn into the lake, and Howard says, "Was that the one?" And I was like, okay, there's way more to what's going on here than just what we're being told. And so that's the stuff where I was like, I need more to this to kind of like get in their headspace, so to speak.
Yeah. And so with the story that we do have here, though, I think it's pretty straightforward in what we've got, right? We've got the girl who's a stripper. She's dating the owner of the strip club, and he's going to make her a star because she is destined for more. She's not what she kept saying, I'm not going to be forced to live the life I was born into, or whatever.
I will not accept the life I do not deserve.
Yeah. There it is.
Yeah.
And so we've got this character who is, like I said earlier, she has a coke habit. She is a stripper. She's making porno, but we're never left in a position to feel, like the story doesn't set us up in a position where we're supposed to necessarily have this insane amount of sympathy for where she is coming from, or what she's gotten into, or what she's doing. What we get here is it's a pretty straightforward slasher story, right? Setup, survival. And so when we start to look at kind of everything that comes together, I think that, Adam, you crushed it in the fact that what makes this story the most fascinating are the plot holes that we can't fill in. Why is Pearl so into Mia Goth? All of a sudden, I've just completely forgot her name. Max. Thank you, Maxine. Yeah. Why is she so into Maxine specifically? Why is there, just something about this particular instance that just has her so horned up? I mean, just there is no other way to put it, right? Whatever this group of people, Maxine specifically, has Pearl engine is revving, right? She's that diesel. You got to warm it up, but she gets there, and then she's unstoppable. The world is hers once she spends the first two acts of this movie getting warmed up. And so you look at the story of these people. You've got the idea of they are the sexually liberated ones. You get you get that idea of these characters are the ones who just acknowledge that sex is a fun part of life. And there's a line in there where Bobby Lynn says, and I want to make sure I have plenty of it before I'm too old for it or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so their storyline is this amazing side by side of kind of what we're led to believe used to be Pearl's life. And so they do a really good job of constantly keeping those two things in sync with this story, which is fascinating. I think that one of the standout moments of this movie, I mean, even above the kills, there's the scene where Bobby Lynn is singing Landslide, and they're all just sitting around drinking beer, and we get this side by side of Pearl, and they're singing Landslide, which, by the way, as I approach 40, I've finally hit that moment in my life where Landslide like puts me on the verge. Right. I listen to every time I hear Landslide now, I'm like, oh God, don't cry. And so, and they did it's that punk rocker looking at 40 thing. Like, I didn't know I was going to make it this far. I don't need a song that reminds me about it. Andrew Harriman saying we think the same. Yeah. It was such a good scene that showed how in sync they were keeping these two storylines that until a little bit later in the movie were decently separate. And so the idea of the girl who's the boom mic girl suddenly deciding she wants to be in the movie and they convince her, I get that was a catalyst for kind of what happened first. I felt like that part was kind of shoehorned in.
I think
I've got an argument for that.
Okay.
I think that leads to the best scene in the movie, which is when RJ's in the shower
and just crying.
Yeah, because this whole time he has positioned himself as a visionary who's like, I'm going to be the one to turn pornography into art.
Right.
And then he realizes like there is no doing that because you have to, like, it involves real people doing a real thing. It can't be simulated. It can't be created, so to speak. And it gets to a point where it affects him personally and he can't separate himself from it. And it's a brutal thing because it just humiliates him completely. And then he becomes, the first victim.
Yeah. So when I look, like I said, I can see where it was the catalyst for everything that was to come. It kind of felt like it came out of nowhere. So I'll leave that to Dave to talk about a little bit since you've got a point. But for the most part, I felt like this story was a degree higher than what we normally get story-wise. I think that when we get into characters, I think there's a lot more. But I think surface level story-wise, we only got a little bit higher than what we generally get out of a slasher. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm fine with it. But that was the actual story that was kind of played out here. The best parts were the parts that were left to us to wonder what was happening. And so there's some good to that and there's some bad to that.
So actually, most of what I want to say about story, I'm going to leave for a little later.
Okay.
For another section
for when we're not talking about story.
And that's, I think, one of the best things about this movie is that, like you said, I mean, it's just a notch above your standard slasher story, but it's all about the subtext, not about the text itself.
Spoken like a true English teacher.
Yeah, that I think
it's about the story that's not written.
Yeah, heavy metal's about when you're not playing.
It's jazz. It's jazz.
That too. Yeah. Stop.
Just
okay. There you go.
Time.
Yeah. Before I get to a couple of points I wanted to say, Andrew, who clearly should have been a guest host today, says the old lady seems
Andrew,
to identify with Mia Goth's character, and if you see it, it's like a Ryan Murphy horror series with Mia Goth playing a young old lady, but there's a bond or identity quality of the old lady and Mia Goth, but in reality, It's the same life based off of the Pearl trailer. Yeah, I haven't seen Pearl
And the
yet.
same actress.
And it's the same actress. So a lot of great points there. The very first thing I noticed about this movie is that opening shot is very reminiscent of, I think, one of the most iconic shots in Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh yeah, they
Where-
open knowing what side of
Talking about the 4x3 gag.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was great.
where it just pushes into the house. It's very similar to that shot. But I can't remember the character's name right now. But when she goes into the house to check on her boyfriend who hasn't come out, because she's sitting on that bench and she's swinging. It also reminded me of another thing that I think he's trying to evoke here, which is classic westerns. It was very reminiscent of the closing shot of The Searchers, which is my favorite western, where John Wayne is framed against the doorway of his brother's house, and it's such an iconic shot, particularly if you're a fan of westerns in cinema. And I couldn't help but think, it's Texas. So I immediately I'm thinking westerns, and I'm thinking Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So I wonder if that was intentional on his part, The Searchers, but definitely Texas Chainsaw Massacre. One of the things that I loved about the story in this movie is the way that the televangelist punctuates certain parts of the story.
Yeah.
And watching it the second time around, the suspicion that I had early on, spoiler alert, that the televangelist was related to someone in the group. Obviously, I know this already, so the suspicions are confirmed by the end of the movie, and he starts talking about
It's that same line that she says.
I will not accept a life I do not deserve. But he blames a secular society for the fall of the traditional Christian conservative values in America, and yet Max, who represents all these things, is a product of his upbringing. And that's one of the things that permeates this this movie is 1979. We are on in the United States, and this is of course everything I know just from history because I wasn't alive then. But we're on the verge of a complete political ideological shift in this country as Carter is on his way out of the Oval Office and Reagan is on his way in. There's this shift in politics.
For our younger viewers, Carter was a peanut farmer and Reagan was a movie star.
Right. No wonder your president has to be a movie star. He kind of like ushers in this this conservative wake that sweeps the country. That is present throughout this entire movie. Is maybe that fear of what happens when the people in mass won't accept you for who you are because you're different from them. And there's a lot of that comes through this movie, particularly with the televangelist. I love that scene. It's a brilliant piece of editing where he's turning his back on the camera and it cuts between him continuing to turn his back and the cattle. And I couldn't help but think, is God or the preacher or whoever he represents, right? Maybe the conservative movement, leading a people to slaughter, right? Because the very next thing that we see is that cow on the road,
right.
And it's been completely decimated. So Andrew coming in, yes, of course he's her dad.
We didn't miss that part, Andrew.
To me that was like it was such a punctuating thing. Like, you have this thing and then all of a sudden it stops. It was the first time we'd gotten that sort of hard cut between the scene before and the scene after, where West as editor is speaking to us and saying he's turning his back on his flock. right? You know, in this case, cattle. I mean, Texas is not known for flocks of sheep, but they are known for lots and lots of bovine cattle.
Yes.
And what happens when you turn your back on the people and you tell them this is what you need? You need this fire and brimstone, but you're not actually giving them what they need. You're giving them what you say they need. I mean, ultimately, it's going to lead to their demise, to the demise of the social contract, the demise of the way that we understand society to work, because you can't be true to yourself, which plays into another theme I'll get into later. But I also love that scene where Howard comes out with a shotgun and he says, "It's not loaded." Right. And to me, I mean, we don't know if it was loaded from the beginning and he was just fucking around with Wayne, or if it really wasn't loaded. But to me, that was such a telling sign of, you know, that like really boastful, that bravado that you see a lot in certain people, where they, you know, it's all for show.
Right.
Very much like it is for the televangelist, you know, where he says, you know, yeah, it's all about embracing God and leaving that secular society behind, and yet he drives his daughter out of the house, right? Or Howard's waving this gun in Wayne's face, and he says, "Oh, it's empty, right? It's meaningless. It doesn't work. It's like his cock." You know,
it's a metaphor.
I mean, the shotgun is a metaphor for more than just, you know, the really heady stuff that I think it might mean, but it's also his dick, you know, as guns often are.
There's no freedom seeds in there.
No, none at all. I also love when you started talking about the things that aren't said, the mystery in the story. There's the scene where Maxine and Pearl have the lemonade together. I love that scene, but even more than that, I love the way that scene ends, because Pearl is obviously attracted to Maxine. I don't think she's attracted to her sexually. I don't think she wants to get it on with her.
Right.
No, she's attracted to the beauty because Maxine has what she's lost.
Yeah,
and she wants for just one moment to be able to recapture that. And there's that moment where she touches Maxine's side, right? And Maxine reels in horror, in disgust, and says, "Why would you do that?" I got the impression that maybe this is something she's dealt with before. The non-consensual touch.
Yeah.
And
she works at a strip club.
Yeah.
Yes, but I think it's more than that. I kept going back to televangelist daddy.
You mean more as in other women like Pearl have kind of tried this before with her?
I got the impression that it might have been her dad.
Oh, okay.
Because I mean, there's such a clear hatred for where she came from that I can only imagine that something like that would have driven her away.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you don't need to be molested by a family member to never want to look at your family again. But
Sure.
but I got that feeling because her father plays such an important role in the background. Like how important is he in what's going on in her head? Andrew coming in again says, yeah, him too. So I'm not alone. I'm glad I'm not alone there.
Well, and you're talking about Pearl and her husband, and I will say there is an element to this that by the end of the movie, what we get is this weird love story, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we get all these different variations of love. We've got the Jenny Ortega and RJ, and they've got, before she decides to be in the film, what would be considered, this real traditional just boyfriend girlfriend relationship. You've got the guy who, yes, he owns the strip club and she works for him, but then you also have this, we've been together forever and there's nothing I won't do for you between Pearl and her husband. And you start to realize that you've been, as you've been watching this slasher and following this story, you've been following different variations of of a love story. You know, I wouldn't go as far as to say it's a romantic horror film, but on top of you know, there is sex on camera, and then there is romantic love romantic love sex later on. Geriatric sex is sex too, right? So
yeah, I mean, everyone deserves a fuck.
Exactly. You know, and so it's really interesting. You get this after watching the two of them just slaughtering these people. You get this really sweet scene.
It's tender.
It is tender is the exact right word, and it's so weird. Like in my notes that before they started having sex, when they're just sitting there and they're talking, in my notes I just wrote love story ? Because that's what it boiled down to for these two, was that all of these awful things they were doing is because they love each other so much. And that I think is a part of the story that is explored in just the right amount. I think that we get Andrew telling David it needs to be gentle. We're all going to get there someday, right? And so that idea of love in all its forms, the free love couples who are, you know, I'm okay with my girlfriend having sex on camera, and then Bobby Lynn, and he's always going to be Kid Cudi to me. Like I know he had a name in the movie, but you know, and is he your boyfriend? Yes, sometimes. You know, they're
great line.
They're a love story of convenience and of making money. And it was just interesting to see all of those things kind of piled in on each other.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's one of my favorite things about this movie is the way that the elderly are portrayed in it. And obviously one of the big themes here is, you know, what is beauty and its relation to age. But one of the things that I absolutely love thinking about in relation to this movie is, and I thought about it in actually not in the scene where we see old man ass cheeks, but
we did see old man ass cheeks. Dude, wait, I have seen.
I was watching that scene and I was like, oh gosh, they're really going there and doing this. And then I was like, I don't know what camera angle I would prefer besides this one.
I think that's the best one.
I feel like, yeah, it's like you start going through the catalog and it's like, nope, that one's worse. That one's nope, that one's worse.
Not fisheye, not fisheye.
Yeah. I have seen more old people genitalia since we started this podcast than I ever thought I would see.
Oh, and the Love Witch, that's right.
Yeah, the Love Witch, Midsommar. Midsommar was like, here's old people full frontal. Like it was just, and hey, sure, I'm here for it, right? All bodies are beautiful. Let's do it. I mean, so whatever. But I just, I am constantly amazed at how much naked old body I continue to see because of this podcast.
I think you reach a certain age where you don't care anymore,
right?
And it's like, you know what, I was never naked on screen, so let me do it.
If you look up that actor and all his other roles, it's stuff like, you know, third orc from the left in the Lord of the Rings movies. Like he's done everything in makeup his whole career.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and he's not that old. He's not nearly that old.
Oh yeah,
no. There's so I was saying it's not the scene with the old people sex. It's actually a scene where after Pearl gets all dolled up, she goes downstairs to Howard and he tells her, you know, I can't. It's my heart. And he leaves and he doesn't touch her. We never see him touch her in the movie until they have sex. And I had this thought, you know, was it the loss of sex that destroyed that relationship? Or was it the loss of love? And did the loss of love come at the loss of sex? I mean, intimacy is such an integral part to our lives, right? And I'm trying to approach this from a serious way, right? Because I mean, fucking is great and fucking is good, but also it really is important. Human touch
Yeah.
You know, simply shaking someone's hand. I mean, that's such an important thing. A hug when you need it most, right? You know, these things. This is what makes us human. It's what separates us from cattle, right? Is that we do understand the value in touching one another. And that could be touch in an intimate way, and it could and it can be touch in any other way. And I think because of his fear of losing his life for his love of his wife, that is what ultimately led to that relationship being destroyed and her seeking to fill that void in any way possible. When really what she needed to fill the void was Howard, right?
Yeah, she just needed Howard to fill the void.
Yeah. You know, and it was such a powerful scene, I think, because it really does. I mean, that's the final straw for her when he won't even touch her. And then we get Landslide, you know, which is, I mean, on top of the fact that it's an amazing song, right? Fleetwood Mac is one of the greatest bands of all time. Stevie Nicks, one of the greatest singers and songwriters of all time.
Speaking of cocaine.
Right. But it's also a song about self-reflection in the face of an ever-changing life. And it's really powerful because what brings about that change that happens in Pearl, what makes her snap in this moment, because clearly she snapped before, right? The corpse downstairs tells us so.
Right.
But it also brings about the change in Jenna Ortega's character in what was her name? Lorraine.
Rainey.
It's change and facing your true self, and what happens when you deny that, I think is such an important part of the story. You know, on top of the mystery of it, the corpse that they have in that basement. I was so intrigued by this thing because I freezed the frame, right? and I studied the penis long and hard, or low and flaccid, whatever.
As any red-blooded American man should.
Yeah, no, you see a dick, you study it. It's the American way. Here's the thing. I thought that maybe it had been like flayed off or something like that.
I couldn't tell what had happened.
It's
just
not.
From the
it's
shot.
not.
Yeah.
It's intact. It's an intact penis.
Adam, I couldn't tell. Dave, let me tell you.
Let me
I also,
describe
when
it
it
in
was
detail.
when I was renting this, I picked standard def because I thought it would be more in keeping of the spirit of the movie to watch it in standard def. So maybe it just wasn't detailed enough for me.
You need the tracking
That's fun.
to come up from the old
need that 4K
VCR. Yeah. But there is blood all over his penis.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's such an interesting thing, because we see Pearl come on to RJ, right? Like she needs that physical touch. She needs someone to tell her that she's worthy of love, that she's even if it's not really love, even if it's just feigned love, right? That's what she wants.
Right.
The only people who will give it to her are literally dead. They have to be dead to say yes to her, or rather to just not say no to her. Right?
Valuable distinction.
That is a valuable distinction. And I really think that she molested this guy's corpse after murdering him. And that's why there's all this blood all over his dick. And this is one of those like those mysterious plot points where it's like, what's the story behind this thing? But I seriously sat there and I analyzed this thing, and I turned to my wife who was watching it with me, and I was like, what do you think the chances are of this happening?
And she was like, I don't care. Push play. So I don't.
Yeah, she was like, can we get this guy's dick off the screen?
Yeah. Fair enough. So speaking of bodies, like the one hanging in the basement, what we have in this movie is some pretty bold casting choices. Like I said, I mean, he'll always be Kid Cudi to me, right? Like, yes, his name is Jackson Hole in the movie. But
Andrew Harriman says Kid Cudi did a great job.
He did.
Absolutely.
And so we got characters that, like we said at the top, that had some nuance to them, and we got some really interesting acting choices with these characters. So who stood out for you, Adam, when you look at this cast of characters?
Well, I love Martin Henderson.
Yeah.
He's one of those underused dudes who shows up too infrequently and stuff. And I was annoyed because the review that I watched on YouTube after the fact referred to him as Matthew McConaughey, and I was like, dude, put some respect on his name, man. He was in a Bollywood movie.
But that's so spot on, because every time I'd see him in that cowboy hat, I was like, man, this dude wants to be Matthew McConaughey so bad.
Yeah. I mean, he's coded for it perfectly. But he's one of those guys, like, every time he shows up, he just does a great job. He does good humans work, and so him, and then
good humans work.
Yeah, human. Yeah. Am I saying that right? Yeoman, or is it Yemen? I can't remember. It's a thing. It's a real thing. I'm not.
Oh no, I believe you. I just don't know
it. Like the military rank.
He's but it's like an old English
yeoman.
term.
Yeah, yeoman.
Yeah, yeoman. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying that he's good at being human.
Yeah. No. He's a good character actor. Is what I'm saying.
Definitely. Yeah.
And then really kind of shocking to see Brittany Snow playing the character that she was playing.
Yeah.
I remember I forget what the name of the show was, but she made her bones on that NBC show 15 years ago about like kids in the 60s or whatever.
American something, right? American Dream, maybe?
Yeah, it was about like American Bandstand, and she was like, the happy-go-lucky girl next door on that show.
She's the mean girl from Hairspray.
American Dreams. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
American Dreams.
Yeah.
And she is the mean girl from Hairspray.
She is the mean girl from Hairspray. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's playing against type and clearly having a ball with it. Enjoying the fact that, she gets to be this kind of dilettantish. By the way, did y'all notice when she leaves the strip club, it's through a door where a woman's being attacked by an alligator?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was so good. When I look at I love some of my favorite moments in this weren't necessarily just about the actual characters. There were just the way that some of these moments were played is what stands out for me. I love when Wayne goes to try to find RJ, and he's standing there in just his drawers, right? Like just his tighty whities. And he's like, all right, yeah, fine. Let's go find him. Should I put on boots or I don't know, pants? Nah, to hell with it. Yeah. Right. It's just a farm. What could happen out here? And so, he just walks out, and then 10 minutes later, we get this silhouette of Kid Cudi butt naked in the door with all of God's glory just flopping between his legs. I mean, that thing almost deserved a credit. Yeah. And so there were some really fun things that a lot of the people did that brought these characters to life. The intensity that Mia Goth brought to the role, interestingly enough, not when she was acting in the porn scenes, but when she was, thank you, Andy. But when Andrew, excuse me, we also have an Andy who listens. But
who also works with us.
Yes. But the intensity that she had that was always focused on that moment of being something greater, that drive that she had, that yes, she was a stripper and she was doing porn, but those were just stepping stones because she was going to be somebody. And it wasn't portrayed in a way that it was cartoonish. It was portrayed in a way that felt very real. Mm-hmm. It felt like somebody who actually viewed these things that they were doing as stepping stones to being a greater person. And I loved that.
That's another inversion that West pulls off at the end, which is that Maxine is the one who gets away, despite being, I would think, the least sympathetic character of the group.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Like, she's the final girl, and it's not even that she doesn't care that Wayne's been killed or that everybody else has been killed, but at the end of the day, if it's gonna be a hindrance to her getting what she wants, then she's gonna leave it behind, and that's what she does at the end.
Yeah,
which that's another thing you're not expecting. And then I don't even know if the sequel to this is going to be a horror film necessarily. Like it might end up being something like Boogie Nights or I don't know, something completely different.
Yes, yeah, because I forgot to mention at the top, they also announced this week that we are getting a sequel to this, Maxine with 3 X's, which I can only assume is going to be about her career in the pornography industry.
I wonder if they're going to take the road, which of course, I mean, at that point it might be old hat, but I wonder if they're going to take the road of Maxine becomes Pearl.
Right.
Where, maybe they establish in those first, couple of minutes, couple of scenes that maybe she did, maybe she didn't end up achieving those dreams. How does it affect her in the long run? And does she end up like Pearl at an older age, longing for the good old days, even if she did have them? Right. Because that's one of those like really interesting things about life is the people who never went out and did the things that they wanted to do. They always express that regret. And then the people who did live their lives, I always hear them talking about the good old days, so it's almost like a lose-lose situation. There's no chance of you ever ending up happy, because you're just fucking old now.
Sorry,
I
just got a
text. That's rough.
I just got a text from my sister. Apparently, she was watching this in front of her mother-in-law.
Oh my God!
When we were talking about the Gonzo bit.
Whoopsie.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Continue.
Sorry, Jim Henson. So, I mean, for me, the obvious actor in this that just blew it away was Mia Goth. She's incredible because she pulls off.
Did y'all know about the dual role going in?
No, I didn't know about that going in.
I didn't know, but I've avoided the Pearl trailer until after I finished this, but I'd seen stills of the beginning of the Pearl trailer and saw that it was also Mia Goth, so I had suspicions. But it wasn't until the credits finally rolled that I was like, okay, yeah, she did play both roles.
Yeah. I saw this about a month or two ago, and Pearl had been announced, but I didn't know anything about it. And I knew very little going into this, only what was in the trailer. And I got the impression that Pearl was played by an actress who was younger and in incredible looking prosthetics. But I didn't quite piece together that it was Mia Goth until like halfway through the movie. I was like, is she playing both roles? And at that point I looked it up and I was like, holy fuck, she is. Which I thought was incredible. The other character that to me just like literally every line that she said had me either in stitches because it was so damn funny, or I was just like amazed at the depth that the character can have. And also I think I've had a crush on her since 2002. Apparently, I just checked this. Is Brittany Snow. I mean, she was so damn good in this movie. I think that she has the most quotable lines in the movie.
There's a moment, Dave. Now, I know that you are technically from farther south than us, being in Miami, but Miami is not.
Oh, but this is not the South.
Right,
no, this is South. This is North Cuba, man.
There's a moment where Brittany Snow's character shines in the most Alabama way when Kid Cudi looks at her and says, "I think I love you," and she just hits him with the "Oh, bless your heart." And I mean, it's so pure Southern blow off. Like that is the classic Southern lady line, and I love that so much.
So there is a touch of the South down here, particularly when you travel just a little further north than Miami. Once you get into Fort Lauderdale and West Palm, you start to venture into the South, but you don't really get into the South until you leave West Palm. Okay. Then there's South, then there's Disney World, and then there's the South again. So it's really interesting. And I've gone all over the state and all over the South. I had family that lived in in good old Memphis, Tennessee. For
so you know a good bless your heart then.
Yeah, I know a bless your heart. So this is my favorite section where we're going into right now. And I'm again gonna toot my own horn here because I love this this title. I called it "Read Between the Tan Lines," and I think that this movie boasts an unusually complex set of thematic elements here, especially for a slasher. So
we haven't even talked about God yet, which I'm gonna make sure we get there.
So. Fair.
How do you think the subtext in this helps elevate X, or does it not? And we've been throwing it to Adam, so I'll go to Daniel first here.
So I think that when we look at the subtext here, when we look at what's not in the script, right? What we get is we get a story that I can't figure out if it really, really knows what it is or if it wanted you to kind of determine what it is. And that's where I was left hanging just a little bit with this. I saw that you had put this one in here, and I was trying to kind of go through and look at everything. And a lot of it is stuff that we've touched on already, right? I feel like there's a very fascinating look at how love changes with age and with the length of a relationship. I think that we are given a pretty in-your-face idea of relationships being personal to the fact that, to the point that it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about what you have in your relationship. I think that a lot of that stuff was there, and I don't know if I couldn't put my finger on. Andrew says yes, it could get a bit stagnant or not. So I felt like this was the place in the movie where I felt I was missing something. Not that the movie didn't have it, just that it was over my head, or I was paying attention to the wrong things, because I'm fully aware of there were more things that they wanted me to take from this. And I just kind of missed out on them. When you had told me you said that you had, a good amount of stuff to talk about with this, I was like, great, because I'm missing that piece. And I wasn't sure, and I'm not downplaying anything about it. It just, maybe that just kind of went over my head. I kind of missed out on some of that, where everything that I picked up, I felt was very deliberate and there. I didn't get as much subtext out of it that it seems that you did. So I enjoyed what I was presented, and I enjoyed trying to fill in what I wasn't, but I kind of missed out on some of that stuff.
Okay, fair. Adam?
I think there's a lot of different ways you can look at what the movie's trying to say, or certain questions that it raises. Like from just a basic film perspective, you've got two halves of this movie, which are split between sex and then violence. And so in that sense, that might be Ty West just saying, here are the two like essential elements for entertainment,
right?
In their rawest, as you said, most gonzo form, right? I do like there's that middle portion of the film right before things get crazy, when the characters are finally resting after a day of shooting, and they're having these conversations with each other. It gets kind of philosophical about what sex means, and I like that it portrays both sides of that issue, about wanting to preserve the intimacy and keep something safe and special, versus this kind of other free love angle. West doesn't make a judgment about either of those things, and he shows the consequences of both of them, I think, pretty honestly. When you have these characters who are shooting this X-rated movie, and then things change, and suddenly RJ is crying himself in the shower because of what Lorraine
one of the
is
best scenes in the movie. Yeah,
because at that moment he realizes all of his art school faff and nonsense and bluster, cannot change the fact that you have to have a certain worldview in order to make this kind of stuff. And he's realizing he doesn't have that when Lorraine, abandons him, for lack of a better word. And then one thing I thought was really interesting, I want to go back to Maxine's dad, the preacher.
Mm-hmm.
He is entirely to blame for everything that happens in this movie. And I think it all comes down to that one line, I will not accept the life I do not deserve, which, full disclosure, I'm a Byzantine. I'm not Reformed. I don't know what anybody's theology or doctrine is here, but it is, if you become a Christian, if you get baptized, you are literally accepting a life you do not deserve. So I think it makes perfect sense that Maxine takes that and then runs with it and uses it to justify everything that she does. Because he got that part wrong and he presented it incorrectly to his flock, and he lost the person who
Plus, he could never compete with Cody's Mandingo. That's that's spot on.
Quite. So I think what makes that really interesting is the conversation in the car on the way to the farm, because each of these characters has their own theological outlook on things. You'll notice none of them straight up say, "Oh, God's not real," or "That's all hogwash," or anything like that. There's a point where Bobby Lynn says, "I look beautiful and I cause people to lose control of their faculties because I'm so beautiful." And then she says it would be a sin to deprive them of that. So she justifies it in terms of what God would want. And I had another example for this. Now I'm blanking. This is why I'm not good on podcasts. Shoot. It'll come back to me. But the point is, I thought it was interesting that none of the characters have a genuine, they contextualize everything within their sexual ethic and whether or not it's justified. And then instead of trying to kick God out of that equation, they actually use him to try and justify how they feel. And I thought that was really interesting, because I think a weaker screenwriter would have just said, "Oh, I was raised by these crazy fundamentalists and I hate them, and everything they say is wrong," and that kind of stuff. They don't do that, and that's another layer of complexity that I think works really well and provides a lot of tension.
Yeah, you've got a really good point there, because it would have been easy to turn the Christianity that was presented in this movie into a joke. And instead of doing that, they presented it as a valid plot point. And I love that idea of the dad being completely to blame for everything that happens, because I didn't think about it like that till now, but I like that a lot.
Yeah. I have to agree with everything you said there. To me, the most interesting thing about this movie, which I started picking up on, and maybe it's there, maybe it's not there, I don't know, but I was picking up on this in my second watch through the movie, is the importance of truth in art and the importance of truth in life. And it kind of starts off with that very first line that Maxine says. She says, "I'm a fucking sex symbol."
Yeah.
She knows precisely who she is. And it's in that truth that everything begins to unravel in those that don't have a grasp of their truth. There's that line when they're in the van, when RJ turns to Lorraine and he says, "When did you become such a prude?"
Yeah.
When she's talking about,
and then just like the preacher, it's turned around right back to him.
And I love that line, because it implies that a woman is only allowed to express herself on her man's terms, which again kind of plays into that, traditional conservative ideology that's being lambasted this entire movie. It's okay for other people to partake in this because it doesn't affect me, but you can't do it because that does affect me directly.
Yeah.
It's that whole, Lorraine's not like them. Lorraine's a good girl.
Mm-hmm.
A good girl who, according to Andrew, is Shia LaBeouf's ex.
Oh,
actually, no, they're back together.
Well, there we go.
There's
which hope that works out for them. But anyway,
I think very early on, RJ's inability to be truthful with his art, which is something you started to hint at, Adam, is made very apparent when he thinks that he's making this elevated porno, except that, I mean, he's not.
He's absolutely not. And the funniest part
is very
is
textbook.
Yeah, the funniest part is when Bobby Lynn is giving him advice to make the movie even cornier than it. Like he doesn't even know enough to tell her, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, and he takes it like that is great film advice.
Yeah, yeah, and that's that thing there, because Bobby Lynn understands what it is that they're doing. They're selling sex.
Yeah,
they are not selling highbrow pornography here. This is not the smart man's porno.
He's trying to make the next Debbie Does Dallas.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't know when the last time you saw Debbie Does Dallas was, but I don't remember the fucking story, but I remember what Debbie does.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's because that is an Andrew coming in good with well. Yeah, it's such a telling thing, because he has no idea what the truth of art is. He knows what he's studied in film school. I assume he's gone to film school because he's just as douchey as most of the guys I know that have gone to film school. Just like all the other English majors that I knew, myself included, were a bunch of self-righteous douchebags.
The way he says avant-garde in that Texas accent.
Yeah, one of these things is not like the other.
Yeah.
I love, to kind of go back to that point. Kid Cudi tells him, there's one point where I think it's that very first sex scene where he gives him some direction, and he looks at him and he says, "Why don't you just point the camera, stay in your lane, and let me do the screwing?" Yeah. Because again, he doesn't understand the truth of that moment. Like, they were having a really, really great moment there, and he's got to put some spin on it there, where it's Andrew coming in with gold here. Her clit was in her throat. Theology teacher, everyone. Passion can't be faked, right? There's and there's a reason why I think Wes focuses on that with Bobby Lynn's character. Because she's a good actress. Bobby Lynn, right, is a good actress, because when Jackson says, like, "Oh, that can't be faked," right, and then she proceeds to fake an orgasm with no help at all, right, and then she's like, "Oh, but you did great. Don't worry about it." There's a difference between that scene and his scene with Maxine. There is a passion there, and it's the same actor there. What's the difference? It's Maxine. She knows herself. She knows the truth of fucking, and she knows how to present that as art. And that's the difference between her and Bobby Lynn and Lorraine, is that she really, really gets it. Right. Wayne tells that to her. He says, "You have that X factor," and it's what awakens in Pearl that turn. Right. She sees that and she's like, "Fuck, I had that, and I let it go, or I lost it, or something, but I want it back. I want that truth of myself back." And it's also what unlocks in Lorraine this, like, "Fuck, I want that too," because I don't think that is a sudden turn. I don't think it was shoehorned there. I think that, and there's a really, really subtle bit of acting there, because Jenna Ortega is a great actress. She's more than just, the horror girl. And I know that a lot of times once you've worked in a genre, you get lumped in there all the time, and you start to lose a little bit of your your sense of credence as an artist. But there's one moment there where Maxine is just fucking lusting in this fuck, right? And she's reveling in it, and she's truthfully enjoying it. She's presenting true fucking art on camera. And it goes to Pearl, it goes to Bobby Lynn, and then the camera looks at Lorraine, and there's this look in Lorraine's eyes that she didn't have before. And
Right.
that's her
Okay.
realizing there. She was like, there's something magical happening here. And it doesn't have to do with a loss of ethics. It doesn't have to do with a loss of morality. It has to do with a discovery of self. And it's that very thing that the televangelist is trying to take away from people. Because it's really difficult to control someone who really knows who they are. If you can strip people away from their identity, it becomes a lot easier to control them and say, hey, why don't you tithe to this church?
That's like cult
right?
leader 101.
Cult leader 101
is to destroy destroy the individual.
Exactly.
And then, ironically, he's also giving them the exact mantra that they need to
Yes.
divorce themselves from him.
Yeah. But that's the incredible thing about cults, is that like you have all the tools in your toolbox. You're just unable to see that you can use them in that way. To me, that was the most amazing theme that ran through this movie, because there were such subtle little nods to it. Like even I think there's that scene when RJ decides he's going to leave, right? Yeah. And we had seen, it was like a quick shot when they go into the convenience store, and Wayne is looking at, different condiments, ham and bread and stuff. And he picks up a jar of mayonnaise and he reads it. He doesn't just pick it up right away. He reads it first and then does like a, yep, that's the one. And we see that same jar of mayonnaise sitting on the counter where his keys are. And what is it? Real mayonnaise. Even the fucking condiments are more real than RJ is in this movie. All right. I don't think that was by mistake. I'm almost certain that was by design, because Ty West is a real smart fucking guy. All right. That is I think that the coolest thing about this movie, that it speaks to the artist. And Ty West has talked about the fact that this movie is almost an exploration of horror cinema, not just the next edition in it, but it's also throwing back to it.
Yeah, and that idea of Ty West throwing back to it brings us to the final topic here before we get into rating, which is this idea that this movie was essentially, it was a love letter to the genre. And very early on, Dave, you referenced the fact that this very gracefully towed that line between being a legitimate piece of cinema and an exploitation film. So what made this movie more than just an exploitation film, Dave?
I got hints of a lot of different movies here, whether they were just, subtle nods or, approaching homage. There was a lot here that it was West's love letter to the horror genre. The car that sunk into the bog immediately made me think of Psycho, right? There's this place that is supposed to be safe haven. You come here and you're supposed to be good. And very clearly, this is not the first time that this happens, because there is that car that's sunken in there. There is that corpse with the intact penis, as we now know, right? That is sitting in their basement. What the fuck is going on at Bates Motel? What the fuck is going on at Howard Inn? I love that connection there. And it's not just okay, we're going to throw a nod, towards this old movie here, but we're also going to use some of the elements of that movie to help tell this story. It's pretty thoughtful, right? Obviously, Texas Chainsaw Massacre's DNA is all over this. Like you get it right from the trailer. But But another one that I loved seeing, that love for the genre there was the reversal of the famous "Here's Johnny" scene from The
Yes.
Shining. He's Howard's got that axe, and we don't see his face like we see Nicholson's face. And he's not trying to break in; he's trying to keep someone from breaking out. But it's that same sort of play of the axe on the door, and the panel of the door breaks out, right? It's a beautiful way of paying homage to one of the greatest horror movies of all time, while making it unique and making it its own thing, and reminding you that this house it's a madhouse. These people are fucking crazy people.
Yes.
Right. I love that. I love the way that he subverts our expectations of the classic horror tropes. You spoke a little bit about Adam, about how Maxine is not, or should not have been, the final girl.
Yeah.
She's not sympathetic. She's not the good girl, right? If it was sympathy, then it should have been Bobby Lynn. If it was who was the good girl, it should have been Lorraine. And it was neither of them. It was the tough girl. It was the one who knew who she was from the very beginning, right? Going back to the idea of, the theme of the truth of your life, the truth of yourself is the most important thing here. It's what keeps her alive, her knowing exactly who she is. And that's I think such a great subversion of that final girl trope. Because it very easily, the final girl could have been Pearl.
Yeah.
And
that's kind of what I kept waiting for. Honestly, I kept waiting for this moment where Pearl was a final girl. What about you, Adam? Like, what genre references or anything did you catch in this?
I think David hit all of them.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Good.
Shout out.
Lose any sleep over it now.
I forgive you. Shout out to Lorraine, because I didn't find this movie. I didn't think it was very tense. I didn't think it was very scary at all. I think, slashers just don't hit me on that level. But Lorraine's death I thought was perfect, because it comes out of nowhere, and it's just quick and brutal and unexpected. And I think that's probably the best kill in the film, even though it's not as showy as some of the others.
Right.
Probably agree with that.
I think there was an opportunity for some kind of, I guess the biggest source of tension for me was wondering if it was going to get into folk horror at all, and we were going to find out that these two, the young characters are running away from tradition and conservatism and fundamentalist religion and all this other stuff. And what if they found themselves in the hands of this old couple who were disciples of some dark occult force? Like, I kept kind of wondering if that was going to happen at a certain point, and then it never did. It goes towards the romance angle, but yeah, I think it's Texas Chainsaw, and it's got that kind of sickly cinematic haze to it.
Yeah,
where you can tell it's really hot, and it's a really stifling environment, which I think works well for the things that some of the characters are going through. So
I think there were a couple more that I kind of picked up on that ventured outside that realm of just the slasher being what it was a love letter to, but this idea of being a love letter to anything scary. Like, let's face it, Kid Cudi got clever girled. I'm from Jurassic Park. I mean, when he sets the flashlight up so he'll trudge into the bog and he can get behind him. So that was straight out of Jurassic Park, with the hat and everything. And so we've got that. We've got that great, really high shot of Maxine swimming away from the alligator that she doesn't even know is there, which was Jaws vibes all day. You were
that's interesting that you picked up Jaws.
Yeah, like
I got Hitchcock.
Okay, yeah. See, I can see Hitchcock there too, but like, because it was a water creature chasing her that she didn't even know was there. I was
which that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a great shot. I think it made the Bobby Lynn's kill less surprising. I think I would have preferred having no setup for the alligator.
It made it. It made
other than it's a pond in Texas. What did you expect?
But it made it a payoff though when you're watching this slasher horror film and you see somebody almost get eaten by the alligator and then you finally see it happen.
Oh, that gator's gonna come back.
Exactly. And so I love the like uncredited, just random, Texas Ranger sheriff guy or whatever.
Oh, that guy was great when they find the camera at the end.
Yes, finding the camera at the end. It's just such a great way to end it. What do you think's on it? I think it's one goddamn fucked up horror show, right? And that's how they end it. And you go, oh man, Jaws or Anaconda.
Andrew's in agreement. Yeah,
another good one. And so there were a lot of things here where when he's looking through the holes, you're just waiting for when Wayne's looking through those holes in the barn door, you're just waiting for him to get stabbed in the eye. And then they stab him in the eye.
And it's great.
And it's great. And they show you there's a solid 15 seconds of just staring at that nail and his bare foot walking towards it. And so for all the times that they did turn these things upside down, they gave us plenty of Bill, what's coming. We're just gonna make you wait and see if we're gonna twist this one. They twisted enough things that when they did follow through with something, there was still some surprise to it, which was a lot of fun. Adam, you talked about just being able to feel how stifling it was. That idea, the way that it was shot. Like when we did Love Witch and it was shot and it was supposed to look like Technicolor. This had that grainy, gritty film feel of Texas Chainsaw. And what is a stark contrast is as soon as the movie was over, I went and watched the Pearl trailer, and the Pearl trailer doesn't do that.
Totally different.
Yeah, the Pearl trailer is,
it's classic Hollywood spectacle.
Yeah, it's 4K sharp, bright colors, Wizard of Oz, Technicolor type stuff. And when you see them back to back like that, you realize how important that one directorial decision was in sticking to what this movie really was. There's a great scene where they're walking to the bunkhouse from the van and the camera's a mile away.
Yeah.
And you just barely see them walking, and you just hear this drowning, just deafening insect sounds, which if you've ever been out in the country in the summer, it is not it is not the quiet nights that's presented on, in a
open range.
The open range. No, it's frogs and it's cicadas and it's things that just wake up and scream. And that's the whole point of their existence. That's what you hear on a hot summer night somewhere like a Texas or an Alabama where we are. Oh my God, it's incredible.
We just went through that here.
And so there were a lot of things that set a tone. I thought I got to disagree with you on that. I did think that a lot of this did build really good tension in those things. But like you said, you're not a slasher guy, so it's not necessarily what you were looking for, that type of tension, but just the stillness when you're in a genre that thrives on when's the next big thing gonna happen.
Yeah.
And you've got these sweeping shots with next to no dialogue. That's when, as a slasher guy, that's when I tense up, because it's a Pavlovian response.
What are they setting up?
Right. When everything is calm. Oh no, what's about to happen? And so so from the angle of loving the good, down and dirty slasher, those things set the stage for everything that happened with the kills later on to really just, we all knew as soon as we didn't see Pearl's other hand that RJ was not long for this world. Mm-hmm. But man, the brutality of going straight for the neck and then stabbing him until the headlights of the van are covered in blood.
What a beautiful shot.
So now everything we're seeing is through this red filter because that's our light source. That that's a color version of something Hitchcockian, right? Where you are now so overwhelmed with how much blood there is. That's the chocolate syrup running down the drain.
I was gonna say, but without chocolate syrup on the headlights.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, but that's what that is, though. It's a callback to that, because the black and white photography of that movie. I mean, realize it came in 1960. Just a year, just a year or two before that, he had done North by Northwest in full color.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a little bit of that like noir aspect to it, where it's dark and the film stock is going to show you that, but also you can get away with more violence in black and white.
Right.
And so when you take away the color and it's all one color, even if that one color is red, you can get away with a little bit more, because that is a brutal fucking scene.
Yes. Hey, during the PG era of WWE, they were big. Like, as soon as people would start bleeding, they'd cut to black and white, because it's less shocking in that moment, and then you can get away with it still being a TV PG thing, even though Ric Flair is just turned into a human blood pile.
Yeah.
So,
well, that Targaryen hair of his, anything's going to show up in bright, vivid colors.
Because his lunch was 3 aspirin.
Yes, absolutely, without a doubt. But yeah, so I think that the way they did a lot of those things, these modern takes on that stuff, I was just amazed at how none of it's always real thin ice when you start playing with homage, and you start to get close to that idea of it just being a ripoff. Movies, video games, music, anywhere you go, when there's something you love and you want to make something that's like that, it can be really hard to toe that line between this is mine, but it's also a reflection of what I love. And I think that Ty West pulled that off beautifully.
Perfect. And that leaves us only one thing, which is our rating. And so if you are new here to Shiver, let's tell you that we only rate movies against themselves. That's why we don't use stars here. So every movie gets its own unique rating metric. And for this one, Daniel and I have decided to go with a possible 5 old man ass cheeks.
Old man ass cheeks, man. It had to be old man ass cheeks for me. My dog has this amazing ability to need to go outside at just the word, just time when I just don't want to get up and let him out. And so last night I'm sitting there and I'm in the climax, if you will, of this movie. And sorry, Adam. It was like when I thought it, I was like, I'm gonna.
It's been hanging there like a pinata this whole time.
Low hanging fruit, man.
Yeah.
But you always pick it.
You gotta.
All of this is going on, and this is when he decides he's never had to pee this bad in his entire life. And so I just grab the remote, I hit pause, I walk out to take the dog out, and I come back in, and I didn't even realize that what I had managed to do was freeze frame, just perfectly framed old man ass cheeks. And I was like, that's with me forever. Like this is, and it wasn't something I wanted to study, like how Dave was so into that dead guy's dick. It wasn't like that for me. It is burned in there.
It was for academic purposes, Daniel.
And so as soon as we kicked out, and I was like, yeah, it's gotta be old man ass cheeks. So out of a possible 5, which I suppose involves half an ass, out of a possible 5, old man ass cheeks, what do you give X?
Well, if you've ever seen the show Hannibal, you know that half an ass cheek is more than possible. So, I'm going to go with the 3. I think there's more good than bad. Like I said, I think it has some redeeming qualities to it. The homage stuff doesn't work for me as much, and I actually think y'all have brought me over on a few of the background things about the questions I had regarding the old couple and what's going on with them.
Educators at heart.
Yeah, there you go.
The more you know.
But like I said, this is not the type of thing I would be naturally attracted to, and I don't see myself going back to it, but I am interested to see what Pearl gets up to, and just all the stuff about, like, Howard is a veteran of 2 world wars, and I used to be a dancer, and like there's an incredibly wholesome setup there, and so I'm interested to see how that gets twisted. So
All right.
yeah, I'll, three feels right.
Solid.
Daniel?
I went into this episode thinking that I was actually going to go a little bit lower than this, but Dave, your very philosophical arguments on a few things that were down points for me have turned me. And man, I'm putting the 5 on this. I thought that it was fun. I thought that it was a great blending of a couple of different things. I got some really good shots. I got some good kills. I got a decent story. And like we said, with slasher stories, not what I'm in it for. And they raised it up just enough to where I was feeling it. And I was leaning 4.5, but after sitting here and listening to what you guys say, Adam's stuff and your stuff about how important the evangelist on the TV was, that stuff is all hitting a little bit more home for me, and I'm going 5 on this.
I was leaning the same way before I rewatched. When I first saw this movie, I mean, I loved it because of the nostalgia. I loved that we finally got like a hard hitting slasher movie. I felt like we hadn't had one of those in a while. Except for that new Texas Chainsaw. That one did hit pretty hard.
Yeah.
So I think it's a rarity these days. But I didn't really think much more of it aside from that. I got the whole, what is age, what is beauty, all that stuff. But I was like, oh, it's nice. But I mean, it's about the sex and the violence. And then I rewatched it and I was like, fuck, this is so much deeper than I thought it was. And I just kept mulling it over. And then I watched a bunch of interviews with Ty West and the cast. And I was like, okay, I think I am picking at something that's here. I don't think I'm reading too far into this, and I have gone down that that literature teacher rabbit hole where it's like, oh, look at this and look at this and look at this, and in the end, Ernest Hemingway's like, it's a story about a man and a fish, and and I think that there is a lot here that Ty West had to say, and I'm pretty sure there's more that I haven't picked up on yet. And I want to go back and I want to rewatch it for all the nuance that's in this story, for all the nuance that's in the acting, for all the nuance that's in the music. I mean, the fucking music in this movie is fantastic, man.
Yeah.
It's so telling of what's going to happen. And in that way, it's very much like a slasher, but it's also very new and very modern sounding. It's great. I mean, it manages to be elevated horror, and it manages to be lowbrow at the same time, because you're enjoying the kills and you're thinking about what the fuck that kill meant, and your dick's hard, so it's like a fucking perfect horror movie, man. Like, what is there not to like about this if you're a horror fan and you're in particular a slasher fan? And I am both. So
you're going 5.
I'm going 5. Yeah. I was in that 4.5, and then I started thinking. That's my problem.
So we got 13 divided by 3. We'll hit that at that's 4 1/3, right? So we can go to 4.5. We can go to 4.5.
There you go.
We'll go 4.5. So 4.5. Old man ass cheeks. The final rating here. For
so it's really
X.
like it's 2 pair and a quarter.
Yes.
Right?
I believe that's accurate. So, Adam, we really appreciate you. I did not realize when I asked you to come on to do this one that it was going to pull you out of your comfort zone, being a slasher. So I appreciate you hanging in there and doing it with us. It's been great, man. You got anything out there you need the people to know about?
I guess Letterboxd. I follow everyone back who follows me. It's my favorite social media app, just because it's just one thing and there's no BS. So my Letterboxd handle is @Condrarian, which is just contrarian but with a D, because my name's Condra. So It makes sense on paper. It doesn't make sense when you say it out loud.
When you say it.
Yeah. I'm also at Contrarian on Twitter. You can follow me there where I talk about, video games and nonsense and education. So,
done some great video game write-ups too. I didn't even think about those.
Thank you. Yeah, I was a freelancer for 5 years, so it's a muscle that begs to be worked out every so often. But you could also anywhere, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. I think it's on Napster as well. I have a comedy album called Back When He Had Hair, which was true in 2018. So yeah, like I said earlier, if I disappointed you on this episode, go listen to the album because it's great. If I do say so myself. But anyway, yeah, thank you so much. Y'all are too kind. This was a lot of fun, and I would love to keep listening, to come back in the future if you
excellent. Yeah,
like that again.
We'll do a supernatural one and get you in your element.
Yeah, let's if I could talk less about gonzo pornography, that would be great.
I'll see what we can find. I'm
really hope none of my students were watching this, but we'll see.
So you can find Adam.
I had a great time, y'all. Thank you so much.
I'm glad.
You can find Adam on all the social medias at Contrarian. Of course, if you're looking for us, you can find us everywhere at Shiver Pod. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you go to shiverpod.com, you will find links to all of our social media, as well as links to where you can find all of our episodes wherever you get them. And you can find the link to watch us if you're so inclined to see our beautiful faces as we record every week when we do go out on YouTube, and then they're saved there forever. So if you head to shiverpod.com, you can find links to all of that in one place. Nice streamlined website. And don't forget, if you really love our logo, located right here, you can head to TeePublic, where if you look for Geek Bro, you can find not only us, but other podcasts on our network. You can get our merch put on anything.
It took me a while to find where that corner was.
It's a good logo.
Yeah, that's a great logo. That was actually done by a former co-host Neri. His brother did that. It's a great logo there. So I think we hit it all here.
I think so.
We've got some really cool stuff coming up for Halloween.
We do. We've got some fun stuff planned. If you've been listening for a while, last year we kept teasing Season of the Witch, and then stuff fell apart.
Yeah.
We do have Season of the Witch on the schedule now for October. So we're gonna have some fun this year.
Absolutely. So on behalf of all of us here on Shiver, fight you very much.